The house was quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful. Nicholas stared through the glass, unmoving, as if expecting the stillness to answer something. A tune drifted into the room, delicate, precise. It wasn't the radio. It was Rosa, singing softly, unaware of the man watching. He didn't breathe. That voice, unexpected, beautiful, was coming from someone he thought he already knew. She moved gracefully, her voice carried on the breeze. It wasn't performance. It was instinct. Her voice lingered long after she stopped singing. It disrupted something inside him. Something he hadn't noticed was still alive. "You speak French?" he asked suddenly. She turned, caught off guard. "A little. Enough to sing." "That was Debussy, wasn't it?" "Yes," she said. "Clair de Lune." A beat passed. "It was beautiful. I studied voice once," she said. "Lyon. On scholarship." "And then?" he asked. "I became a mother." He didn't respond immediately. Her honesty cut through the formality he wrapped himself in. She moved with her usual grace, but now, he noticed more, the rhythm of her steps, the way she positioned each item. Another year. Another invitation. But this time, something inside him hesitated before discarding it. He imagined walking into that room with someone real. Someone who didn't belong and because of that, maybe mattered more. "Would you come with me?" he asked. She turned, startled. "Where?" "The gala." She laughed quietly, unsure. "Me? Why?" "Because I want to," he said. "Not out of pity. Out of respect." "I don't belong in places like that," she whispered. "You do more than most," he replied, simply. She held the invitation in her hand like it was fragile. Like it might disappear if she blinked too long. "If I go," she said softly, "I go as myself. No glitter. No games. I wouldn't want it any other way." Neither smiled. Neither flinched. But the air between them shifted, respect filling the space where hesitation once lived. They parted without another word, their footsteps echoing softly, like something had just begun and neither knew what to call it. The gala hadn't arrived yet. But something had changed. And in the silence of that change, a door opened inside both of them. That night, Nicholas couldn't sleep. He sat in the study, the fire reduced to glowing embers, a half-full glass of whiskey warming in his hand. Across from him lay the gala invitation, still unopened. His thoughts drifted not to business or numbers, but to the melody that had interrupted his morning, the voice of Rosa, floating through the garden. He thought about how many years he had walked past her, treating her as a fixture in his house. And now? That voice wouldn't leave his head. Neither would she. In the quiet of her bedroom, Rosa unfolded an old concert program from a time that felt like another life. Her name, printed in elegant serif, sat alongside names of professors in cities she had once walked through. She traced the faded ink with a fingertip, barely noticing Sophia, on the floor, humming and playing with plastic animals. Rosa smiled faintly but tucked the paper away when Sophia looked up. She'd never told her daughter about that chapter. And even now, she wasn't sure she could. The next morning, the scent of bread and cinnamon filled the kitchen. Rosa moved with practiced efficiency, slicing fruit, stirring quietly. She didn't see Nicholas, standing just beyond the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching in silence. There was precision in the way she arranged the plates, and care in how she wiped the edge of a bowl. It wasn't service. It was intention. He had seen her in that space every day, but somehow it was the first time he actually noticed. Nicholas walked a familiar path through the garden, one he hadn't bothered with in months. The leaves were brighter than he remembered, the scent of earth more present. He used to pass through this place without seeing it. But now, every petal reminded him of Rose's voice. The weight had broken the silence, not violently, but like light entering a dark room. He didn't know what it meant yet. But he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. It was one of Rose's favorite places, quiet, safe, filled with stories that didn't judge. Sophia colored happily at a low table, while Rosa flipped through an old French music anthology. She hadn't touched one in years. Her fingers trembled slightly as they turned each page. The melodies came back like ghosts, gentle, painful, familiar. For a moment, she hummed. An elderly man nearby looked up, smiled. Nothing was said, but she felt it. For the first time in years, someone had listened. A marketing team droned on about branding opportunities and media impressions for the upcoming gala. Nicholas sat at the head of the table, nodding occasionally, but his mind was elsewhere. Slides about optics, sponsors, and partnerships blurred in front of him. All he could think about was Rosa's voice in her defiance, "I'll go as myself." It rang louder than any pitch. Without a word, he closed the presentation folder, stood up, and walked out, leaving silence behind. Rosa unfolded a letter with frayed edges and familiar curves. It was from her former professor in Lyon, a farewell written in delicate French, filled with regret and encouragement. Her eyes scanned slowly, lips moving silently with each line. It had been a long time since anyone called her gifted. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was remembering who she once was. And for the first time, she wondered if she could become her again. Nicholas hadn't touched the album in years. Each page revealed memories, black tie galas, polished smiles, and the composed presence of his late wife. She had mastered the art of appearances. But as he looked at their images together, he saw what was missing: genuine connection. Then, an odd thought struck him: what if Rosa had been beside him instead? Not because she fit the part, but because she didn't. That thought, uninvited, refused to leave. They passed each other in the hallway, footsteps soft against the wood. No one else around. When their eyes met, something flickered. Not tension. Not apology. Just two people caught in the same moment, feeling the weight of everything they hadn't said. Nicholas thought to speak, but didn't. And Rosa, though she waited for it, didn't ask. They moved on in opposite directions, but something lingered between them, as undeniable as a breath held too long. When Sophia had gone to sleep, Rosa reached beneath her bed and pulled out the box. Inside was fabric she'd bought years ago, too beautiful for daily use, too personal to donate. She spread it across the rug and began to sew. The rhythm was slow but confident. Each stitch felt like an act of reclamation. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was preparing to walk into a room full of masks wearing only herself. And that, she decided, was more than enough. Flashes went off the moment Nicholas exited the car, though the expression on his face gave nothing to the cameras. He adjusted his cufflinks and walked past reporters without a word, ignoring their curiosity. Alone. No date. The gala was already brimming with socialites and curated smiles, but something about his silence sent a ripple through the crowd. He had never shown up without someone, and tonight, his solitude wasn't about absence. It was waiting for something or someone the others didn't expect. The taxi door opened slowly, and Rosa stepped out, heels steady on the pavement. She adjusted her breath more than her dress. No sequins, no glitter, just elegance defined by restraint. The venue loomed ahead, glowing like a fortress of expectation. She wasn't part of that world, but she had agreed to walk into it. Not because she sought validation, but because she was done hiding. Her fingers brushed over the modest fabric as if confirming she was still herself. Then she walked. As soon as Rosa crossed the threshold, conversation shifted. A murmur rolled like wind through glass. A woman with no known last name, no social footing, walking with the posture of someone who had earned her place, not inherited it. Nicholas saw her from across the room. He didn't smile, didn't gesture, just met her halfway. The moment she reached him, he extended his arm. She took it without hesitation. All around them, judgment brewed in silence, but neither flinched. The ballroom glittered in gold, and eyes followed them like spotlights. Laughter faltered. Glasses were lowered. Rosa held her head steady, her eyes scanning the space without apology. She wasn't dressed to impress, she was dressed to remain. Nicholas didn't speak, didn't explain. He simply walked beside her, as if her presence required no permission. In that space of curated elegance and social armor, their authenticity made the room feel colder to everyone else. They sat at a circular table trimmed with silver and crystal, surrounded by names that filled magazines. Rosa listened more than she spoke. A woman in red leaned in, smiled too sharply, and asked where she got her dress. When Rosa named a local tailor, the woman's lips twitched in amusement. Nicholas caught it, but said nothing, yet. Rosa took a sip of water and responded politely. She wasn't rattled. She'd faced worse. But the elegance of her silence was louder than any insult. A murmur passed through the room when the MC adjusted his mic. Unfortunately, our featured performer has fallen ill, he announced with a sheepish smile. We're working on a backup. The air grew heavy with disappointment. Someone made a comment about wasted donations. Nicholas glanced at Rosa, then looked toward the stage again. A pause sat between them like a held breath. He didn't say anything aloud, but his expression asked a question she already knew was coming. You could sing, Nicholas whispered, voice barely audible over the clinking glasses. Rosa blinked. Here. He nodded. Only if you want to. Her chest tightened. Her gaze swept the room, doubt everywhere, wrapped in silk and champagne. It's been years, she whispered. They'll judge. Let them, he said. They'll remember, too. She stood slowly, heart pounding. There were no instruments, no orchestra. Only her voice. But maybe that was all she needed. Heels tapping lightly, Rosa made her way across the polished floor, each step more defiant than the last. She reached the microphone, took a moment to breathe, and looked past the crowd, not at them, but through them. This wasn't for approval. It was reclamation. She closed her eyes and began, not with hesitation, but with reverence. Claire de Lune, a cappella. No instruments. Just air, memory, and a voice that had been quiet far too long. At first, the notes felt fragile, like glass balancing on wind. But then came strength, clarity, and sorrow so real it cracked something in the crowd. The music swept across the ballroom, piercing pretense and privilege alike. Conversation ceased. Even the servers paused. One man dabbed his eyes. A woman near the back closed hers, lips trembling. Rosa wasn't performing. She was remembering aloud. And in that moment, everyone knew they'd witnessed something too honest to forget. When the final note faded, there was only breath. Then, a single clap. Another. And then the room stood, applauding in waves. Rosa remained still, expression unreadable, as if waiting to be sure this wasn't a dream. In the back, Helena didn't applaud. She watched. Not in judgment, but in memory. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, had seen talent before. And she recognized what most of the room only felt. This wasn't a fluke. This was someone lost who had just been found. The applause roared, then faded, but Rosa still felt the tremor in her chest. She stepped down from the stage like waking from a dream, unsure if she was walking or floating. Eyes followed her, mouths whispered, but she didn't hear them. She wasn't afraid, just exposed. For the first time in years, she had shown the world something she had buried. She needed a breath, a quiet space, before the weight of their stares caught up. What she had released tonight wasn't just music. It was memory, hidden just beyond the edge of the spotlight. Rosa rested her hand on the heavy curtain to steady herself. Her pulse beat in her palms. She had not rehearsed, had not even planned to speak, let alone sing. But the music had come anyway, rising out of the place where she kept everything she thought she'd lost. Behind her, applause still lingered like perfume. But in this shadowed space, she could finally exhale. The song was out. The fear hadn't won. But something else was about to begin. Helena didn't need introduction. She walked with the certainty of someone who had shaped many futures. L'école de musique de Lyon, she said, voice smooth and sharp. You sang Ravel, yes? Rosa stared. Yes, I did. I remember you, Helena replied. You disappeared. I had my reasons, Rosa said softly. They were personal. Helena nodded once. And yet your voice remains. I want you in Paris. There's a place for you, if you want it. No judgment. Just invitation. Nicholas stood near the bar, a glass untouched in his hand, watching the scene unfold from across the room. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw posture, precision, power. Helena, with her poise, Rosa, holding her ground. A quiet storm stirred inside him, pride, fear, something harder to name. He had brought her here, yes. But what bloomed tonight had nothing to do with him. It was hers. It always had been. And now he had to choose whether he could walk beside it, or simply watch. Later, they stood side by side on the upper balcony, looking down at the glittering crowd. You changed the room, Nicholas said. Rosa let out a breath. It doesn't feel real. It was. She turned to face him. She wants me in Paris. He nodded. Of course she does. I don't know if I can go back. You never really left, he said. A long pause stretched between them, full of the things neither dared ask. But in the silence, understanding took root. At the edge of the ballroom, Helena pulled a card from her coat and slipped it to a passing staff member. For her, she said. Immediately. She didn't wait for a response. Her work was never to linger, it was to ignite. As she stepped into the night, she didn't glance back. She had seen hundreds of singers. But rarely did one return from silence with such precision. This wasn't charity. It was recognition. And it came with expectations. Neither spoke in the car. Now, inside the mansion, the silence between them had weight. Rosa held the card like a fragile answer to a question she hadn't dared ask. She wants me to come to Paris, she said quietly. Nicholas nodded, removed his coat slowly. Will you? She looked at the marble floor, then at him. I don't know. I'm not sure who I am if I say yes. He met her eyes. Maybe that's exactly why you should. The room was quiet except for the soft breath of Sophia, sleeping soundly. Rosa sat at the desk, the card from Helena resting in front of her. She had thought doors like this were closed forever. She had sealed them herself. But now, it was open, wide, calling, and terrifying. She thought of everything she had given up. Then, she thought of everything she hadn't yet dared to reclaim. She didn't touch the pen. Not yet. But she didn't throw the card away either. Nicholas hadn't touched the piano in years. It wasn't grief anymore that kept him away, it was irrelevance. Tonight, he sat on the edge of the bench and pressed a single note. It rang out into the room like a question. She had awakened something not just in the gala, but in this house, in him. She had shattered silence and shown what it meant to breathe again. He wasn't a musician. But in that moment, he understood what music could do. Rosa didn't sleep. But she didn't cry either. She lay in bed as the sky began to lighten, watching shadows stretch and pull across the walls. Her body was still, but her mind was moving fast. She had crossed a line the night before, not into disgrace, but into memory, into power. And now the world wanted more. She didn't know what she would choose. But for once, she felt like the choice was hers. That was enough, for now. Rosa turned the card between her fingers, its surface too clean, its meaning too heavy. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a confrontation with the version of herself she had locked away. Sophia sat on the rug nearby, humming as she made her dolls dance. Rosa smiled faintly, but the weight in her chest didn't budge. She placed the card inside her journal, somewhere between memory and possibility. She wasn't ready to choose. But she also wasn't ready to throw it away. The headline read, "The Housekeeper Who Stole the Show." Nicholas tapped the screen, irritated by the framing. The article used phrases like unexpected guest, mystery voice, and gilded scandal. He knew this was coming. The media needed its story. What they couldn't name, they twisted. He looked out the window, the city hazy beyond the glass. This world he helped build wanted packaging, not people. But Rosa had no packaging. And that's why they didn't know what to do with her. She entered with quiet confidence, drawn to a navy dress that reminded her of dignity, not display. The clerk approached with a tight smile. "That's custom," she said, her tone flat. Rosa nodded, asking politely about the price. The woman tilted her head. "Starts at 10,000. Her words hung in the air like a dare. Rosa let them settle before responding. "Thank you," she said, and left. She had once measured herself by these runes. Not anymore. He started typing, "You don't owe anyone an explanation." Then paused. Deleted it. Rewrote, "You sang with truth. That's more than they've ever shown." Deleted again. None of the words felt right. Too protective. Too distant. Too much. He slipped the phone into his coat and leaned back, watching the city blur past. Every mile brought him closer to something he didn't know how to name, but felt compelled to protect. Even if she didn't want his protection, the space was tight, but the distance was vast. A couple beside, Rosa, turned away as if she were invisible. Another woman offered a smirk before saying, "You were at the gala, right?" The tone wasn't friendly. It was curious the way people are curious about museum exhibits. Rosa gave a polite nod, said nothing else. The elevator doors opened. She walked out alone. She wasn't ashamed. But she was tired of having to explain her presence again and again. "The situation is gaining traction," a partner said, sliding reports across the table. "Some are questioning your judgment." Nicholas didn't look at the charts. He looked out the window. "They questioned it before." "This is just louder." Another voice chimed in. "She's not." Typical. He turned sharply. "And that's a problem?" The room went quiet. The truth was clear. They didn't care about integrity, they cared about control. But Nicholas was no longer interested in playing by those terms. "You're the woman from the gala," said a voice beside her. Rosa looked up to find a young woman smiling, phone in hand. "That was beautiful. Could I get a photo?" Rosa nodded politely. The flash went off. The woman left. And then, silence again. Her tea had gone cold. She stirred it anyway. This was the price. Visibility came with expectations. People saw only the moment, not the history behind it. And she wasn't sure which version of her they wanted to celebrate. The skyline blinked in silence, 1,000 towers standing over stories no one would ever hear. Nicholas held a glass, untouched. The night air felt sharper than usual. He thought of Rosa, her voice, the wall she lived within. He didn't want to be another wall. But he wasn't sure if he knew how to be anything else. Some truths didn't fit in boardrooms. Some songs weren't meant for silent halls. But once heard, they stayed. And hers had stayed with him. The park was nearly empty. Rosa and Sophia walked slowly, leaves crunching underfoot. They looked at you funny, Sophia said. Rosa nodded. Yes. Why? Because they don't know me. Sophia held tighter. I do. That simple phrase pierced deeper than any headline. Rosa knelt to brush hair from her daughter's eyes. That's enough, she said. And it was. Some spaces would never welcome them. But in this quiet walk, she remembered what it meant to be fully seen. She didn't write often, but tonight demanded it. The pen felt heavy in her fingers. I stood in a room that was not made for me, she wrote. And I did not ask for permission. Each word felt like a step reclaimed. She didn't know if Paris was the answer. She didn't even know the question. But she knew this, she was no longer hiding. The world could stare. It could speculate. She would keep walking anyway. That's her, one whispered. The one who sang. The other leaned closer. She's just staff, right? Was, the first corrected. Laughter hushed. But it spread. Down hallways, into service rooms, under breath. Rosa had been invisible for so long, she had become part of the building. Now she was a headline, and the building didn't know how to hold her anymore. Rumors don't need truth to grow. They just need repetition. And her name had begun to echo in places that used to ignore her. Their conversation stopped the moment they saw him. One gave a nod. The other looked away. Nicholas walked past them without pause, but his jaw tightened. He had lived long enough in this building to know what wasn't said always mattered more. He could feel their discomfort in the way their footsteps faded behind him. Rosa's presence had shifted something, and some of them hated it. They feared the shift more than the scandal. And he was starting not to care. The memo was polite. Words like brand, narrative, stakeholder alignment. But the meaning was clear. Rosa was a liability. Nicholas folded the paper slowly and dropped it in the bin. They wanted neat stories, polished press. What they got was honesty, and they weren't ready. He leaned back in his chair and looked toward the skyline. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't play the part. And that's why they couldn't stand her. She passed through a hallway she used to move through unnoticed. Today, people stepped aside, not out of respect, but uncertainty. Eyes darted away. A door closed faster than usual. Rosa kept her posture straight. She'd cleaned these floors, memorized the sound of the elevator, carried silence in her apron pockets. But now, that silence had turned into a song, and they didn't know how to listen. She didn't blame them. But she didn't excuse it either. Parents clustered in tight groups. Some glanced her way. One whispered. A woman nearby adjusted her bag but didn't meet her eyes. Sophia ran up, smile wide, unaware of the current in the air. I painted today, she said, holding up blue fingers. Rosa smiled and knelt to clean them with a napkin. Did you have fun? Yes. It was a small moment, but it anchored her. She didn't need to belong to those whispers. She belonged here. I'm tired, Rosa said without turning. Of being watched. I know, Nicholas replied. I never wanted this. You didn't ask for it. You earned it. She set the dish down, finally facing him. They think I'm dangerous because I didn't shrink. He nodded slowly. That's exactly why they should fear you. In that moment, neither of them needed to say more. The kitchen, once just routine, had become refuge. The numbers are volatile, a marketing officer said. We can't shake the story if she doesn't play along. She's not a brand, Nicholas said flatly. She's part of your image now. He stood, adjusting his sleeves. Then changed the image. No one clapped. No one objected. But he could feel their resistance pressing against him like air before a storm. They had made peace with artifice. He had not. The stone was cold beneath her. No one spoke. No one stared. Just the wind, the bells, the creak of memory. Rosa let her mind wander to Leon, to music rooms, to her daughter sleeping in a borrowed crib. What she wanted wasn't fame. It was wholeness. And maybe she had taken one step closer. But it came with bruises, spoken and unspoken. She closed her eyes and hummed softly. Not a performance. A reminder. He started with "I'm sorry." Then changed it to "thank you." Neither fit. He crossed them both out. He wanted to say something honest, something that didn't sound like business or defense. In the end, he wrote nothing. Just sat there, pen in hand, and let the silence stretch. He had spent a lifetime writing speeches. But for this, for her, there were no polished lines. Just truth. And truth was harder to say than anything else. "Are you okay, Mama?" Rosa nodded slowly. "Some days more than others. They said mean things about you. I know. Are they true?" Rosa looked down at her daughter's eyes, full of questions, not doubt. "No. But even if they were, I'd still be yours." Sophia squeezed her hand. That was all. No public statement. No applause. Just one quiet night where love was the only truth left standing. The school smelled of pencil shavings and hand sanitizer, the walls covered in smiling suns and shaky letters. Sophia clutched her mother's hand tightly, but her steps were confident. Rosa scanned the space with care. This was more than a visit, it was an audition for the world Sophia would belong to. A teacher smiled faintly as they passed, and Sophia whispered, "This hallway echoes like the hotel." Rosa smiled, tightening her grip. Echoes could be comforting, if filled with love. The classroom was a flurry of colors and soft chaos. Paint splattered on sleeves and desks. Sophia was focused, tongue peeking from her lips as she painted swirls of deep blue and orange. Rosa sat nearby, quiet, unnoticed by the other parents clustered in the back. She didn't mind. Watching Sophia create reminded her of music, how something unspoken could live in color or sound. The teacher leaned over to whisper, "She's quite expressive." Rosa smiled. She always has been. The space was packed, parents holding phones, grandparents adjusting sweaters, little shoes tapping the floor with nervous energy. Rosa sat in the third row, her hands clasped too tightly. She scanned the faces around her, clean, pressed, familiar with this ritual. She felt like an observer. Until the curtain twitched and Sophia peeked through, locking eyes with her. Rosa smiled wide, and her daughter beamed. For that moment, she wasn't invisible. She was everything. A hush fell as Sophia walked to the center of the stage. No music, no costume, just her tiny voice ready to speak. She held a wrinkled paper and read, "My mom sings songs I can't hear, but they make me feel brave." The room didn't breathe. "She cleans, but she's not a cleaner. She's a hero with quiet hands." Rosa felt tears rise, but didn't blink. "She makes our small world big." When Sophia finished, the applause was warm, but Rosa heard only her heartbeat. Outside, parents buzzed in small groups, discussing vacation plans and piano recitals. Rosa kept her head low, buckling Sophia in with practiced hands. "Did I do good?" Sophia asked, eyes wide in the rear-view mirror. "You were perfect," Rosa whispered. One father nearby said, "Your daughter's poem was different." The way he said it wasn't unkind, just unsure. Rosa nodded politely. She sees the world her way. And that, she believed, was more than enough. The library had quiet corners that felt sacred. Rosa read softly from an old picture book, her accent shaping the words like music. Sophia curled beside her, eyes wide. Soon, another child drifted closer. Then another. By the third page, 4 heads leaned in, silent. The librarian watched from behind the desk, surprised. No one had asked her to read aloud. But Rosa didn't need an invitation. She simply shared. It reminded her who she was when no one was watching. "I don't care what the press thinks," Nicholas snapped, then paused. "No, that's not the point." He looked up as Rosa entered. "I'll call you back." He hung up and stood. She held a paper in her hand, an art flyer from the school. "She read a poem today," Rosa said. "It was about me." He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. "It made me realize. She's watching everything." He nodded. Children always do. They shared a moment that needed no translation. The day had been long, full of noise, smiles, and shadows. But here, in this quiet ritual, they returned to each other. Sophia sat cross-legged on the bed, eyes closing as her mother's fingers moved through her hair. "You used to sing me to sleep," she whispered. "Why did you stop?" Rosa hesitated. "I didn't stop. I just sang softer." Sophia smiled. "You can sing louder now." And with that, Rosa began to hum, a lullaby full of memory and hope. "She sings songs I can't hear." Rosa, read, voice quiet. Nicholas listened, eyes never leaving her face. "She's a hero with quiet hands." She folded the page and set it down. "I didn't know she saw me like that." "She sees the real you," he said. "Not the world's version." The kettle whistled faintly. No one moved. In that small kitchen, where meals had once been transactions, something new simmered: recognition, respect. Maybe even beginnings. "Will we be okay, Mom?" Rosa smoothed the blanket around her. "Yes, baby. Even if it's new. Even if it's strange. We'll be okay." Sophia yawned. "Because we have music?" Rosa smiled. "Because we have each other." She turned off the light, but left the door open a crack. The kind of opening that let in just enough light to chase fear away. And tonight, that was more than enough. Rosa descended the stairs with slow, deliberate steps, the morning light casting long shadows behind her. Nicholas stood by the door, coat on, hands in his pockets, his usual confidence thinned by something quieter: uncertainty. "There's a meeting at the foundation," he said, not looking up. "You're welcome to join." Her pause was brief but heavy. "Will it help her?" she asked, meaning Sophia. He finally met her gaze. "Maybe more than we know." The silence that followed wasn't disagreement, it was calculation. They didn't speak as the car wove through traffic. Rosa looked out at the passing storefronts and sidewalks while Nicholas kept his gaze forward, unreadable. Between them sat not just tension, but everything unspoken from the night before. Apologies neither had made. Doubts neither voiced. He glanced her way once, caught her profile in thought, and returned his gaze to the window. Some distances were measured in more than feet. And this one had been growing since the gala. "This is Rosa Jimenez," Nicholas said clearly. "She'll be joining us as an independent consultant on youth arts programs." The air shifted. Some smiled tightly. Others exchanged glances. One man coughed, murmuring something to his neighbor. Rosa stood still, composed. She didn't offer anything more than a nod. She didn't need to. Let them make assumptions. She had come through worse than condescension dressed as courtesy. And she wasn't here to earn approval, just to open doors for others. He handed her a paper cup without a word and sat beside her. "They'll get used to you," he said. "I'm not waiting for that," Rosa replied. She sipped slowly. They listened, even if they didn't hear. He nodded. "Sometimes that's where it starts. And sometimes," she added, "it's where it ends." Neither smiled. But something softened. They weren't aligned in everything. But they weren't standing on opposite sides anymore. At least not in that moment. The garden felt smaller today, as if the sky itself had dropped. Sophia kicked a red ball across the trimmed lawn, laughter trailing behind it. But Rosa barely heard. Her mind ran laps around choices she hadn't made yet. Paris lingered like a ghost, half promise, half threat. Sophia called out, "Watch me, Mama." And Rosa snapped back into the moment, clapping gently, smiling through the fog. She had built a world of safety. But maybe it wasn't safety Sophia needed. Maybe it was example. "Did you like the gala?" Nicholas asked. The question came out casual, but his tone was careful. Rosa raised an eyebrow. "I liked what it revealed." He nodded. "Even if it complicated everything?" "Especially because of that," she said. He handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed, briefly. It wasn't romantic, it was weighted. A touch that carried history and hesitation. They stood in silence, sipping from separate ends of the same story. Stacks of papers lay open, filled with statistics and scanned drawings from schools seeking support. Rosa read slowly, pencil in hand. "This one wants violins," she murmured. Beside her, Sophia drew a sun with too many rays. "Can I have a violin?" she asked. Rosa hesitated. "One day," she said. "When you're ready." "You didn't wait until you were ready," Sophia replied. And just like that, the page blurred. Sometimes wisdom came wrapped in crayons and casual truth. This space could house a practice room, Nicholas said, pushing open a creaky door. Rosa stepped inside, dust swirling in the sunlight. It smells like chalk and forgotten chances, she said. Perfect, he replied. She smiled faintly. These walls had heard silence too long. She could almost hear music lingering beneath the dust, waiting to be remembered. Let's fill it with noise, she said. He nodded. The right kind. He set the needle down, and the crackle came before the piano. Debussy again. Clair de Lune, but slower. Deeper. I used to listen to this alone, he said. I still do. Rosa sat down across from him, letting the music fill the room. It doesn't sound the same anymore, she whispered. No, he agreed. You changed it. The melody floated around them like memory. And for once, neither one needed to speak to be understood. She stood alone, hand resting on the windowsill, watching the city lights blink in the distance. This mansion, once just a workplace, now held layers of voice, of risk, of memory. She wasn't trapped by its walls. But neither was she ready to leave them. Not yet. Behind her, Sophia called softly in her sleep. And in that fragile, sleepy whisper, Rosa found her anchor. Paris could wait a little longer. For tonight, she chose presence over possibility. Rosa stood outside the school building, her eyes tracing the faded paint on the doors. The halls beyond held memories not hers, yet somehow familiar. She clutched a worn envelope in one hand, its edges softened by age. This place had once echoed with music, her kind of music. But she wasn't here to remember, she was here to observe. Inside, she'd heard, there was a program for aspiring musicians. And one of them, unexpectedly, was her daughter. Sophia stood awkwardly near a group of children tuning violins and cellos. Her borrowed instrument looked too polished in her unsure hands. A teacher asked her to play a few notes. She tried. It was rough. But when she hit the first bars of Clair de Lune, the piece she'd heard her mother hum, something shifted. Not in her fingers, but in the room. A few heads turned. Even the teacher leaned in. The melody was off-key, but honest. Nicholas stood near the back, arms crossed, watching as Sophia wrestled with the bow. His expression unreadable, but his eyes didn't leave her. He hadn't planned to come. Rosa had gone ahead. But something about the idea of that girl, her daughter, playing the very melody he first heard in the garden had drawn him in. And as the imperfect notes floated through the dusty air, he knew this wasn't charity. This was inheritance. Raw. Undeniable. After the session, Rosa found Sophia alone on a bench outside, violin case by her side, fingers still curled like they were holding the bow. I messed up, Sophia muttered. Rosa sat quietly beside her. You also played the heart of a song with no accompaniment, no training, and no fear. Sophia looked at her, unsure. Did you really sing in France? Rosa smiled softly. I did. A long time ago. The silence between them hummed with new understanding. That night, in her room, Rosa unpacked an old wooden box. Inside, a folded program from a recital in Lyon, a cracked tuning fork, and a faded photo of her younger self at a grand piano. She laid them on the bed, hands trembling slightly. Then she added something new, Sophia's name, written on a slip of paper, tucked between the pages of the old program. A new chapter, joined invisibly to the one she thought had ended years ago. Nicholas, standing in his library, stared at the same photo he'd looked at dozens of times, the gala night. Rosa, mid-song, guests frozen in awe. He placed it beside another frame, this one with Sophia, snapped from a recent moment she hadn't noticed. They're nothing alike, he murmured. But the more he looked, the less certain he became. In posture, in quiet defiance, in the way they carried their silence, there was symmetry. He just hadn't noticed before. The next morning, Rosa found an envelope on the kitchen counter with a handwritten note, enrollment form. She needs a teacher who sees her. No signature. Just a folded paper with a paid invoice for private instruction at the community conservatory. Rosa touched the corner of the paper like it might vanish. When Sophia came in rubbing sleep from her eyes, Rosa simply handed it to her. It's time you learned what your hands can really do. In a quiet corner of the mansion's sitting room, Sophia opened the envelope again and again, each time scanning the document like it would change. They think I can really do it? She asked. Nicholas, passing by, said without turning, You already are. Rosa raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. Greatness doesn't wait for permission. It recognizes itself. The words weren't meant as praise, they were fact. And in that room, for once, no one argued. That evening, as dusk spilled gold through the tall windows, Rosa sat at the grand piano that hadn't been touched in years. Sophia stood nearby with her violin. "Play what you remember," Rosa said. Sophia began slowly. Her mother joined with the lower chords. It was fragmented, messy, but in the overlapping notes, something emerged, a new version of the melody they both carried in different keys. Nicholas, watching from the hallway, didn't interrupt. He simply listened. Later that night, Rosa tiptoed into Sophia's room. Her daughter was asleep, violin beside the bed. Rosa pulled the blanket higher and whispered a promise she hadn't made in years, not to protect her, but to witness her. As she stepped out, she passed the framed recital photo again. For the first time, she didn't turn away. There was still music left. Not to relive, but to pass forward. Quietly. Deliberately. One imperfect note at a time. The community center was small, with scuffed floors and walls lined with hand-painted posters. Sophia sat in a circle with other children, violin in hand, eyes darting from her sheet music to her teacher. Rosa sat in the back row, her hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't correct. She watched. This wasn't about precision, it was about presence. Every missed note, every awkward bow stroke, was a declaration, "I'm here. I'm trying." And Rosa had never felt prouder. Nicholas stood in the hallway, just outside the open door, the sound of young violins drifting toward him. He didn't move. He simply listened. His gaze fixed on the floor, but his ears caught everything, the struggle in Sophia's rhythm, the pauses, the sudden burst of confidence in one phrase. There was something sacred about witnessing someone discover their own strength, especially when they didn't know they were being seen. Especially when it changed the one watching. After class, Sophia joined Rosa outside beneath a tree. "I was off on the last part," she muttered. Rosa handed her a bottle of water. "You were on for the one before it." Sophia grinned, exhausted but bright. "Do you think anyone noticed the good part?" Rosa leaned in. "The ones who matter always do." Sophia looked down at her fingers. "My hands hurt." Rosa smiled softly. "Then you're using them right." The sun filtered through the leaves like quiet applause. That night, the kitchen was lit only by the hood light above the stove. Nicholas poured tea. Rosa entered quietly, her shoes already off. "She's better than I was at her age," she said. Nicholas handed her a mug. "She has you." The silence between them was no longer tense. It was reflective. Shared. "I didn't want her to have my story," Rosa admitted. "She doesn't," Nicholas replied. "She's writing her own. You just gave her the pen." The next day, Sophia sat at the dining table, music sheets spread before her. Nicholas joined her with a pencil. "See this?" He pointed. "That's a key change." Sophia tilted her head. "Looks like a mistake," he laughed. "Most good changes do." Rosa entered mid-laugh and paused at the doorway, unnoticed. Her daughter and employer, now mentor, bent over the same page, heads close. She didn't interrupt. Some harmonies were better observed than composed. Later, Rosa and Sophia sat on the living room floor, the grand piano behind them silent. They clapped out rhythms, turning mistakes into laughter. "What if I freeze at the recital?" Sophia asked suddenly. Rosa answered without pause. "Then you'll freeze. Then breathe. Then play the next note." Sophia nodded solemnly. "Even if it's wrong?" Rosa touched her heart. "If it's honest, it can't be wrong." Outside, rain tapped the windows in syncopated rhythm. Nicholas sat alone in the conservatory, where roses bloomed against the glass. He held an old vinyl of Debussy, watching the turntable spin without lowering the needle. He was remembering the first time he heard Rosa hum. The precision. The fragility. The command. She had hidden herself so well, for so long. But now, with Sophia, something had broken open. He was no longer listening to music. He was listening to legacy. To everything he'd almost missed. Back at the community center, Sophia played a short solo for the instructor. Her bow wavered. Her tempo rushed. But in one moment, just one, she hit the note cleanly. The teacher smiled. "That one. Hold on to that." Sophia beamed. In the back of the room, Rosa clapped twice, then stilled. It wasn't about getting it right. It was about getting through it. And that clean note? That was the sound of arrival. On the walk home, Sophia skipped ahead, violin case bouncing on her shoulder. Rosa and Nicholas followed at a slower pace. "She's got your fire," he said. Rosa shook her head. "She's got her own. She just let us borrow the light." Nicholas glanced at her. "You think she knows how good she is?" Rosa answered quietly, "She doesn't have to. She just has to keep playing." And somewhere between their footsteps, a new rhythm took shape. That evening, Rosa found a folded letter on her bed. It was a music conservatory's invitation, a trial scholarship for Sophia, based on a referral from Helena. She stared at it, then at the Gala photo on her dresser. Nicholas stood in the doorway. "She deserves the chance," he said. Rosa nodded. "And I'll let her take it. This time, I won't stand in her way." The past hadn't vanished. But for the first time, it bowed, gracefully, to the future. The school auditorium buzzed with pre-show energy, parents chatting, programs rustling, the occasional outburst of laughter. Sophia peeked out from behind the curtain, her small hands clenched around her violin. She spotted Rosa and Nicholas seated in the third row. Their presence was a lifeline in the sea of strangers. Sophia took a shaky breath. This wasn't just a recital. It was the moment everything she practiced for, the first time her sound would meet silence and demand to be heard. Backstage, Rosa knelt beside Sophia, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You're not here to be perfect," she said softly. "You're here to be true." Sophia nodded, eyes shimmering. "What if I mess up?" "Then they'll know you're human," Rosa said with a smile. "But if you play with your heart, they'll listen with theirs." The lights flickered. The stage manager called her name. Sophia stood, violin in hand, fear in her belly, but something steadier behind it, belief. The auditorium dimmed. A single spotlight illuminated the center of the stage. Sophia walked into it with slow, deliberate steps. The hush that fell over the audience was full of weight. She adjusted her stance, lifted her bow, and began to play. The first few notes were tentative, the melody fragile like spun glass. Then, with each bar, her tone grew. It wasn't polished, but it was honest. And the room responded, not with applause, but with silence that listened. In the audience, Rosa sat unmoving, eyes locked on her daughter. Nicholas leaned forward slightly, fingers pressed to his chin. Helena, farther back, tilted her head, her face unreadable. Each of them saw something different on stage. For Rosa, it was redemption. For Nicholas, it was awe. For Helena, perhaps memory. But for all of them, the truth was clear. This was not just a girl with a violin. This was the arrival of someone they hadn't expected to lead. Midway through, Sophia faltered. One note cracked, the bow slipped. A ripple moved through the audience. Her shoulders tensed. She froze for a breath. Then, she inhaled, reset, and continued. The imperfection wasn't a failure, it was a seam in the fabric of truth. And when she resumed, her tone was stronger, steadier. Like she'd earned it. In that instant, the performance transformed, from a recital into a declaration. The crowd leaned in, drawn not by precision, but by courage. The final note hung in the air like the last leaf of autumn. Sophia held it, then let it go. A heartbeat of silence followed. Then applause. Slow, deliberate, and rising. The crowd stood. Parents wiped eyes. Helena joined the ovation. Rosa stood last, not because she hesitated, but because she was lost in the echo of the moment. Sophia blinked at the crowd, stunned. She didn't bow at first. She looked for her mother. When their eyes met, she smiled. Backstage, Sophia rushed into Rosa's arms, her violin still in hand. I squeaked, she laughed through tears. Rosa held her tight. And you soared. Nicholas joined them, a quiet smile on his face. You made them listen, he said. Sophia wiped her eyes. They did? Even the walls, he replied. The three of them stood in that narrow hallway, stage lights fading behind them. No spotlight. No fanfare. Just a moment that would echo far louder than applause. Later that evening, at home, Rosa placed an old photograph next to Sophia's new recital program. In the photo, Rosa stood beside a music professor in Lyon, eyes bright with youth. Now, her daughter's name joined the lineage of melody. Sophia watched from the doorway. "That was you?" she asked. Rosa nodded. "And this," she tapped the new program, "is you. No jealousy. No regret. Only continuity, 2 stories now running on the same staff, in harmony." In the quiet living room, Nicholas sat by the fireplace, an old jazz record spinning nearby. Rosa entered with 2 cups of tea. "You stayed for the whole show," she said. "I didn't plan to leave," he replied. Their eyes met. No need to fill the silence. It said enough. "You were right about her," he added. Rosa shook her head. She proved it herself. The fire crackled, and in its glow, something soft, undefined, settled between them. Not an ending, an overture. Sophia lay in bed, her violin resting beside her on the nightstand. Rosa sat at the edge, brushing her daughter's hair back gently. "Do you think I'll play like you one day?" Sophia asked. Rosa smiled. "You'll play like you. That's better." Sophia yawned. "Can we go to Paris someday?" "Maybe," Rosa whispered. "With your music, the world might come to you." The moonlight streamed in softly. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby, and inside, peace settled in at last. As the night faded into morning, Rosa stayed by her daughter's side, her hand gently resting on Sophia's back. The violin lay still on the nightstand, not as a symbol of talent, but as a witness to something greater: love, sacrifice, and courage passed from one heart to the next. Their breathing, soft and in rhythm, echoed a harmony far deeper than any melody ever played. It was not the end of a song, but the quiet start of a new movement. If this story meant something to you, tell us what part stayed with you most. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if these stories resonate, we'd be honored to have you with us. Subscribe for more.